Given the success of the original Switch, the above-average sized dens seemingly back to their cocky ways, doing things like charging $80 for games and $10 for what should be a free tech demo. Seeing how the Switch 2 is already selling out the BUT, I'd say it's probably more likely than not that Nintendo's gonna keep steaming people's hams, seeing as how, well, they're already getting away with it so far. Ordinarily, cocky shenanigans are bad for business, and I'd say that's definitely going to be the case here too, at least to some extent, but even if the Switch 2 doesn't quite outperform its big bro, I'd say that it's virtually impossible for the console to outright fail. Why is that, you ask? Well, sit back in your step-pepper's dirtiest chair and I'll tell you why. Alright, so even though the Switch 2 is off to a good start by literally selling out and being a hard-to-get hot-ticket item or whatever you want to call it, it does also kind of feel like it's just not as hot as the original Switch was. A lot of this has to do with the aforementioned cockiness of a video game company on top of the world jacking the prices up or charging literally any amount of money at all for Welcome Tour, let alone $10 friggin' dollars. I mean, hell, if you go to any Switch 2 posts on social media, you'll see people riding Nintendo's ass about the prices, so even though I do think most people are gonna end up caving and paying $80 anyway, it does still leave a sour taste on a lot of people's asses. Maybe things don't feel red hot right now because there's no new 3D Mario game just yet, or hell, maybe it's just me even. And again, yeah, the Switch 2 is selling out the ass at the moment, so like, it is pretty stupid to deny that it's popular, regardless of how flustered you might be at Nintendo right now. But even if you're a Nintendo fan, man, it's also stupid to deny that something feels a bit off right now. However, no matter how mad people may be at Nintendo for, well, doing Nintendo things, I think it's pretty much impossible for them to outright fail again anytime in the foreseeable future. Like, obviously, the above-average-sized ends failed plenty of times in the past, but never completely and utterly. For example, the Virtual Boy shit the bed to the high heavens, as we all know, but the Super Nintendo and Game Boy at the same time were still doing donuts in the parking lot, so, as a company, Nintendo was hardly in any real danger. I feel like if Marlon Brando farted on the set of Godfather, like, yeah, that sucked, but, I mean, you're still kinda killing it right now. But the Super Nintendo and Game Boy were both absolutely killing it because they both had games that people felt like they needed, with one console being portable. And then there was the Nintendo 64, which did get whooped by the PlayStation, sure, but, like, it still did really well. The PS1 was just, you know, kind of a phenomenon. PS1 was just kind of a phenomenon. Then it was pretty much the same story with the GameCube and PS2, albeit by a wider margin, with the Xbox added into the mix for good measure. Not to mention the Game Boy Advance was crushing it too at the time. And why were these Nintendo consoles doing so well despite the fact that Nintendo were making mistakes? Of course, because they had games that people felt like they needed. Fast forward to the Wii U though, and, well, we finally got Nintendo's first true home console failure on our hands, and there's really no way to sugarcoat it. This friggin' thing failed and cost Nintendo a lot of money. Partially because the overpriced and oversized gamepad that nobody asked for, and no games that even needed it, let alone used it, not letting people transfer the retro game purchases over, among other things. However, one thing the Wii U did have was games that people felt like they needed, which had always saved Nintendo in the past. But the thing is, for the first time in history, Nintendo's home console wasn't the only one offering these first-party games that people needed to have. You see, Nintendo also had the 3DS right alongside the Wii U, offering pretty much the exact same games. Like, sure, the Game Boy, GBA, and original DS also did the same thing in the past, but in those cases, they weren't really the same games. Because before the 3DS, Nintendo's portables always offered the same IPs, but with compromises for the sake of portability. Like, sure, Link's Awakening, Oracle Ages and Seasons, Minish Cap were great, but the majority still viewed Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess as the real meat and potatoes of the series. The handheld and console versions would usually complement each other and offer similar flavors, sure, but ultimately there were still completely different experiences. But the 3DS, on the other hand, usually offered the exact same thing. The exception was A Link Between Worlds being a 2D Zelda game versus Breath of the Wild being a 3D Zelda game, but A Link Between Worlds just so happens to be the best 2D Zelda game of all time, fight me, and the Wii U didn't even get Breath of the Wild until the console was pretty much already dead. I mean, it was really more of a pity release than anything else. Nintendo just wanted to be nice to the people who bought a Wii U specifically to play this game that came out years after it was supposed to, proving that, despite how greedy Nintendo can be, they do sometimes do the right thing. Occasionally, anyway. But aside from Zelda, though, for the first time ever, a Nintendo console that offered 3D Mario, 3D Zelda, hot new IPs, Mario Kart, Smash Bros, Pikmin, my favorite 2D Donkey Kong game ever, and more, outright failed, mainly because the 3DS offered the exact same experiences, at least for the most part anyway. Like, sure, the Wii U versions were better, but outside of Pikmin, they were really only like 5% better at best. Hardly enough to justify paying double the price for the hardware and software without portability. This right here is why the Switch was as big of a success as it was, because since the 3DS's graphical capabilities passed the everything looks fine milestone, Nintendo was pretty much competing with itself for the first time ever. So it really just made sense to make one hybrid that could be a portable and home console at the same time. Sure, this meant sacrificing graphics to keep the cost somewhat reasonable, but despite being incapable of playing a lot of AAA games, the Switch still killed it anyway. Why? Of course, because it had games that people felt like they needed. It is tempting to bury Nintendo sometimes when they pull stuff like the Wii U, Steel Diver, charge money for Welcome Tour, or literally Cardboard. But at the end of the day, whenever they come out with a new 3D Mario, Zelda, or even Mario Kart, we all know we're gonna buy it. I'd even argue more so now than ever before given how nostalgic people are for Nintendo's IPs these days. I mean, the Super Mario movie made like $1 gazillion, and it really wasn't that great. I mean, it was good, I liked it, but it made as much money as it did just because it's Mario, and people feel like they need Mario, and the Switch 2 is the only place they're sure to have plenty of that. I mean, back when the GameCube was a thing, the only people who could have possibly been nostalgic for Nintendo were angsty teens who thought they were too cool for it at the time, and even then, there were still enough people who felt like they needed Nintendo for the console to do pretty well. So with there being as many generations who grew up with Nintendo as there are right now, there's really just no way that Switch 2 could possibly fail. I mean, I've owned a PS5 and Series X for a few years now, and I literally haven't even turned my Series X on in over a year, and I do play my PS5, and I'm currently absolutely loving Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but as far as true PS5 and Series X exclusives are concerned, though, there really isn't that much that wasn't also available on the previous gen consoles. Despite this, though, the PS5's doing really well, and even the Series X/S are still a moderate success if you consider Game Pass revenue and software sales, and those two consoles offer a lot of the same games that the other one does. So given that the Switch 2's got plenty of franchises that people feel like they need, like Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Animal Crossing, Smash, Splatoon, Metroid, Luigi's Mansion, plenty others, and God knows what else, all available on one console, there really is no way a Nintendo platform can ever outright fail again, even if they don't always break records. At least not until all the nostalgic adults who grew up with Nintendo die off anyway. Don't get me wrong though, that doesn't mean that I'm saying we shouldn't keep riding Nintendo's asses whenever they do lame stuff like they've already started pulling, but even though I am skeptical that the Switch 2 could be as big of a hit as the first one, I do think that there's no way it could outright fail given how many IPs they have up their sleeve. Not to mention the fact that it's portable as well, which I know the Steam Deck's also portable, but the average Timmy and Jimmy aren't gonna get a Steam Deck, I'm sorry. Anyway, that's all for today, but if you got a kick out of my incoherent rambling and disturbing imagery, though, then you should check out this video I made on the history of Zelda fans being fickle, but if you'll excuse me, though, I gotta go testify in court. Later.